Hey everyone, Harold Fisher, WHUR News. Of course, the Daily Drum is over, end of the 8 o'clock. But now it's time for a few minutes with HUR at Home, a time when we talk to people who are doing things in the community, particularly the way things are right now under the COVID-19 pandemic and the shutdown. And, tonight, I am talking to Rosie Allen Herring. Rosie is the president and CEO of the United Way of the National Capital Area. She's a mover and a shaker
Oh, Lord.
in this community. Yeah, that's right. She's on there. Rosie, come on in here and join me. How are you? Look at you.
I am well. It's good to be with you tonight, Harold.
Well, thank you so much. Before we even get into the meat and potatoes of what the United Way is doing, we always ask how people are doing under these difficult circumstances. So how are you doing? And you and your family?
I will tell you, we're very fortunate. I really have no complaints in the grand scheme of things because of the work that we've been doing. We've seen so many in our community who are not doing well. So when you see such need, when you see the normal needs of the community exacerbated under these circumstances, you can't help but be thankful. But I also, think often about my team. We have two offices in downtown DC as well as in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. And my team is my number one concern when it comes to the professional work that has to be done. So everyone is well. They're working remotely. Our operations are still going on. We're still able to serve the community. So in the grand scheme of things, we're fine. I'm fine. I can't be more grateful for what I do have and my family being safe and being with me. And we have a place to shelter in place and we haven't missed a meal and luckily we continue to work. So I'm really good.
You remember about 2 months ago when things really started to get serious and we had not yet fully grasped the situation here, but I spoke to you, and I know the United Way had put out this $50,000 fund to help people, and I know that probably moved pretty quickly, right?
It absolutely did. At the onset of the crisis, we immediately activated our emergency assistance fund. And it was seeded with $50K from United Way of the National Capital Area, followed immediately by, at that time, $100K from Pepco Holdings. And since then, we've had a number of partners as well as individual donors, many of them your listeners, who have come in and decided that everyone can do something during this crisis. And so that fund went from $50,000 to a little over $1 million. And much of that has been already disseminated and allocated to organizations that are doing good work serving families on the ground during this crisis and at this moment.
Because I remember one of the things that I found really interesting about that was that this wasn't just for some basic necessities, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm doing this from memory, that there were some cash allotments for some really needy families. Wasn't that the case?
A little bit. We don't give directly to families. We don't give funds directly to families, but we do give to organizations that are helping many of the families with some of those types of needs as well. What we determined, of course, early on, it was not just food insecurity that many needed in terms of the food distribution, making certain that the meals were there. We certainly were able to do that. But as the crisis went on in week 3, week 4, when we saw people beginning to lose jobs, and then we knew that it was really becoming not just a health epidemic, but an economic crisis as well. And so we do have many of our nonprofit partners that are working to make certain that families have the dollars that they need in order to be able to navigate these tough times. It's certainly never enough. We still need any of the listeners who are here with us tonight to be able to contribute. They can do so. Even today is a special day of Giving Tuesday, and we have our Do More 24 going on as well. But this is something that's going to be with us for quite some time.
Because there's been a lot of discussion about, of course, Tuesday, but what is Do More 24?
Well, Do More 24 is a 24-hour day of online giving that Your United Way has now been doing for the last 7-8 years. And during that time period, we try to highlight as best we can the work that many of our nonprofits are doing that really need that support many nonprofits get the bulk of their support the last 3 months of the calendar year. And, that's leading into the holiday season. People are very fortunate. You recognize that you're perhaps blessed, and everybody wants to do a little something, even if you're motivated by the end of the year tax break of your itemized deductions. But generally, when we get to this part of the year, many of those nonprofits have run out of those funds already. The needs are always there. And so we started Do More 24 and did it at this part of the year because it really helps many of the nonprofits finish their particular fiscal years a little stronger than they would perhaps if they were in the red and not having to wait for another 3 to 6 months for their normal quote unquote giving cycle to bounce back. And so it's also an opportunity for us not only to share the work of many of our nonprofit partners, but to share the work of Your United Way and a lot of the programs that we're doing, because people tend to think of us as the pass-through, and we have to show them that we're also on the ground doing programmatic efforts, serving families every day as well.
Talk to me a little bit about the shift that you've had to make with the United Way and just managing the infrastructure of the United Way there, and how you guys do your work, because we have done a lot of it, and me sitting here in my living room, it's a prime example. So how has your job changed?
Well, in regards to the crisis, it's changed tremendously because, what was considered our normal day-to-day operations has shifted. And so we're all working remotely. But what it does is it's always a challenge, is always an opportunity to look at things differently, and to know that we've not been able to skip a beat in terms of our operation speaks to the professionalism and the caliber of people that I have the pleasure of working with every day. But I will say that over the years, Your United Way has been shifting because it's a 100-year-old brand. We've been here for over 45 years, and people know the name even if they don't know what we do. And so having the opportunity to be able to share, to be able to tweak our business model, and to be able to say, now we don't want to be known as the pass-through. We want to be known as a true partner who's committed to collective impact, who really and truly wants to see our community thrive. And we're willing to bring in the expertise to make that happen. So it's a lot different than perhaps it had been, and maybe perhaps from what people know. But that makes us hopefully an even better partner and an even greater asset to the community. At least we hope we're giving it a shot.
What's the hardest thing for you right
now? I would say the hardest thing is for people to assume that United Way has a lot of money and that we don't need their contribution or their donation. Although we've been around every year, this is a zero-sum game for us. We have to start over and try to fundraise and try to get people to trust us and be good stewards of what's been given to us. But every year, those dollars start from zero and go to wherever we can get them to go in the course of a year. So I think it's busting through that myth and maybe demystifying, our business model, so that people will know that not only are we not just the pass-through, that we do programmatic work, but that we don't have a pot of money that's literally sitting in the side and we can just decide to spend it whenever we'd like. We have to start fundraising literally every day, and every year it's a zero-sum game. So I don't want any of our listeners to think that Your United Way won't be here for you. We will make every effort to do so, but it's hard work, and our team has to make certain that people know we don't just have money that we're sitting on. We need their support, and we want them to go on this journey with us. And because of that, it makes us even more committed to being a good steward and also being able to demonstrate an impact for that donation.
But I guess also, and you make an interesting point, as it relates to the fundraising, you may have to look for other pots of money, because there may be organizations that have been tried and true and have been sticking with you for years and years and years, but all of a sudden, because they've been impacted by the shutdown and as well as the greater health crisis, that they may not have the money that they may have easily written a check for in years past.
Absolutely. And that is our biggest concern as we look out for the next 18 to 24 months, because Harold, we believe that this crisis, while we may get over the immediate response in a couple of weeks here or there, but there's going to be a long-term recovery that's going to be necessary. This is not going to be flip a switch and everybody goes back to to normal. This will be a new normal, and we're no different in that new normal. And many of our contributors who may have been longtime corporate partners or longtime individual donors may or may not find themselves in the capacity to be able to do that continuing. So it's requiring us to look at our business model differently and look for other sources of those funds. So for new donors that perhaps had not, given to us before, we need them to know that we're here and that we're willing to continue to do the work. And for new corporate partners who perhaps didn't have a rapport with us, we want them to know that we're here and that we're trying our best to make certain we can contribute to their strategic priorities and their business model as well. So it's requiring us to look at everything a lot differently. I hope and pray that we just never have to stop serving the people that we know need it the most because we just don't have the funding to be able to support.
Has anything surprised you during this past 2 months or so?
I don't say surprise. I think that if anything, we all recognize that at the onset of the crisis, we knew that we were fighting against this sort of kind of imaginary enemy that you can't see, can't touch, can't feel, can't smell. But as time continued to go on, I think we've recognized that this was not something that was going to be over relatively soon or quickly. And so not necessarily surprised. I think if anything, I'm always comforted by the way that this community comes together and what we do for one another in terms of offering that support. Not surprised by that. I think if anything, the surprise continues to be that this is not a certain segment of our population that's impacted by this particular crisis. This is something that has touched literally everyone. I don't know anyone whose life has not been changed in some shape, form, or fashion, whether you've been a health, whether or not your health has been impacted, whether or not you're a frontline worker, whether or not your children in education have been impacted, whether or not it's an economic issue in terms of wages, jobs, you name it. There's just no segment of society that hasn't been touched by this crisis.
That's funny that because just on Sunday, my neighbor across the street had a 16th birthday party for her daughter, and she said, "Well, come over." And I was thinking. But I went. But the interesting thing was, in the backyard, what usually would have been the handful of people, literally the handful, I think there were about 5 or 6 of us there, we would have been, kind of like this. Instead,
right.
We were like this.
Right.
I'm over here and somebody's over. It was just strange. And it is, unfortunately, the thing that has kind of brought us together, even as they say we are apart. And this new normal, I mean, that's really the very first time. I think I was there for about 90 minutes, and I said, thanks for inviting me, and I left. But I think that's I know. You got to take care of your neighbors.
I know. Hey, it's a Sweet 16. That's a milestone now.
Yes, absolutely, and you're not too far from that, actually. So.
I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that and remind my college girls.
Hey, there you go.
I've been reminded. I have a youth, but anyway.
Rosie.
You're onto something, Harold, and I know we're joking, but it's a new normal. And even when we go back to whatever we consider to be normal, it will be different. And it's going to require us to be a little bit more intentional and a little bit more focused about our health and a little bit more focused about, what we do and how we engage and how we interact. And I think that that's going to be a little awkward and perhaps even a little distant because I'm a hugger.
Yeah.
Typically, how I am. And to now be distant, almost feels counterintuitive to who I am. But I recognize, that it's not always indicative of how someone feels about you. And you're going to have to find different ways to be able to show that you care and still be safe. And it's not about, caring about my safety. It's caring for the other person on the other side of that particular engagement as well. So
well said. And I think, through your work with the United Way, I think we're going to continue to see that, not just obviously over the past 2 months, but over the next 2 months and next 2 years. Like you said, it's going to be a new normal, a strange new normal, but something we're going to have to get used to. Rosie Allen Herring, President and CEO of the United Way of the National Capital Area. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. And if I can just ask you to let your listeners know that we're in the middle of our 24-hour day of giving, as you know, and we have about 3.5 more hours. So if they choose to go in and do some support for United Way or some of the nonprofits, they can go onto that website, do more 24, the number's 24.org, and be able to make that contribution as well.
Okay, there you go. Rosie, stay safe. You look good. I see you have your jogging suit on, so it looks like you've been working out.
It's my United Way. It's my United Way apparel. I tell you.
That's
I have
United Way jogging suit, there you go.
If I was in the studio, I have the pearls on, so you'd know that. Thank you, Harold, for being a good friend to United Way, and certainly for your leadership and for all of your listeners and what they do for this community every day. I count it a joy to have the partnership.
Love you. Please stay safe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Absolutely. Be well. Be safe.
You too.
Bye-bye.
That was Rosie Allen Herring with the United Way of the National Capital Area. I'm Harold Fisher with HUR at Home. This is on WHUR.com. It's on WHUR's Facebook page. It's also on YouTube. We invite you to watch all of our HUR at Home programs. Really good stuff. And for me, and the entire news team and the WHUR family, stay safe, everyone. I'll see you on the radio. Good night.